Some say that both the world wars were the result of a massive, worldwide conspiracy by an elusive secret society known as the Illuminati. Others say the wars were really all part of the same grand European power struggle between the old world and the new, between royalty, politicians, communists and capitalists. Others say it was just a series of unfortunate events. What is the truth? Do men plot? Yes, they do. Are there secret organisations that have manipulated society and even brought about war? Yes, there are. Did they create the First and Second World Wars? Yes, they did. Are they behind the rise of the Nazi Party? Yes.
To set in motion an industrial blitzkrieg that will make it possible for England to blast Hitlerism from the face of the earth.
It was fully and freely debated. Men were stamped interventionists and isolationists, and the debate grew bitter. Into this free debate trooped the agents of the aggressors, for they too were permitted to speak in our democracy. They wore Hitler's uniforms, but they wrapped themselves in the American flag. They preached the doctrine of racial and class hatred, for Hitler had said America could be conquered from within and fall as an overripe plum to the Nazi master race.
The history of World War II is incomplete. A massive element has been left out of the history books: the role of secret societies. The influence of organisations that are cloaked in mystery upon world events is staggering. From Nazi Germany to Great Britain, from Japan to Russia, secret societies were plotting and planning to change the world. This is the story of those secret powers and how they managed to influence the entire world. Before we delve into the world of the conspiracy theorist, we need to just state a few facts. The world of politics is a complicated thing. Countries that appear to be enemies are often dealing with each other through business. They often share common religions, and they certainly share common secret societies. One of those as the Freemasons, and there is no denying that they exist around the world. Their members range from the ordinary young businessman to the high and mighty, but they are, and were not, alone. In this documentary, we will investigate the many secret societies that existed, and indeed plotted, during and before the Second World War. And now we turn to some of the interesting elements pointed out by the conspiracy theorists of the world. The first really big claim is that the Nazi Party itself was funded by American capital, that without Wall Street we would never have seen the rise of Adolf Hitler. Amazingly, the statement is probably true. General Motors, Ford, General Electric, DuPont, and many other American companies were actually involved with the Nazi Party. We have to remember that before the war, American capitalists would have been attracted to the seemingly incredible way the Nazi Party were turning the fortunes of Germany around. But many of them actually helped fund the Nazi Party years before they came to power. Banks such as J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank and Warburg Manhattan were involved in providing capital. Even during the war, American companies supplied oil to the Nazis via Spain and France. Almost 90% of the German armoured trucks were provided by General Motors and Ford. Even the machines used by SS officers to track down Jews and dissidents were invented and supplied by IBM. These are just examples, and there were many more from other nations. However, none of this proves any links to a grand conspiracy by a secret society. It just proves that the greed of capitalism has no enemies. A common conspiracy theory is the claim that the USA knew all about the impending attack on Pearl Harbor, that Japan was forced to attack the Americans in order to facilitate a timely entry into the war for the USA. At the time, up to 80% of the oil Japan needed was supplied by the USA. But in 1941, President Roosevelt brought in an oil and steel embargo, forcing the Japanese to go to war. There is hard factual evidence that the hierarchy within the US government knew an attack was imminent. One famous warning was ignored, and the reasons do, on the face of it, seem bizarre when we look back. Then, strangely, several main vessels were removed from Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese attacked. As if by pure coincidence, Movietone were waiting with modern colour cameras to capture the whole thing, and this was utilised for propaganda throughout the remainder of the war. Nobody could argue with it. Evidence abounds that the Americans knew the attack was coming, but did nothing to stop it. Now, looking back, all of this seems strange. But could it be a grand political manoeuvre? Ever since the end of the war, Japan has been ruled by US-friendly political parties, and not an elitist emperor. Indeed, this is very similar to what occurred in Europe during the First World War, when the royalist elite were all but wiped out. This too is claimed as a secret society plot to bring about a new world order. For some reason, conspiracy theorists believe that the West wanted a communist East, a kind of opposition. In fact, they claim that defeating Japan ensured the rise of communism in China, and that US General C. Marshall was even sent to China to ensure the Maoists took power and unified the country. The biggest secret society that did grab headline news before, during and after the war was the Freemasons. It was claimed by the Nazis that the Masons were in league with the Jews and were in fact jointly responsible for the German defeat in World War I. Hitler said in his book Mein Kampf that the Masons had become an instrument of the Jewish conspiracy. He said the general paralysis of the national instinct to self-preservation, begun by Freemasonry, is transmitted to the masses of society by the press. In 1933, Göring, the president of the Reichstag, was in agreement and said that there was no place for Freemasonry in National Socialist Germany. In 1934, the Ministry of the Interior ordered that Freemasonry be disbanded and all lodges and property be seized. They were prohibited from holding government office. Here we can see the clear fear of the Nazi Party that the power of a secret society was so big it needed curtailing. Had they not been so powerful, and had there not been some evidence of their involvement in various revolutions, then there may not have been a case. But the fact remains, many Freemasons were proud of their revolutionary heritage. Men in power were very often also Freemasons, and Freemasons very often gained power, and men very often have egos. The Nazis even created Freemason concentration camps to deal with dissidents who were forced to wear an inverted red triangle. By 1935, Hitler ordered the full dissolution of all Masonic lodges in Germany and accused them and the Jews in conspiring to create a world republic. In 1937, Goebbels even held an event to show all the objects seized by the state. When the war finally began, the Nazis banned Freemasonry in all countries under Nazi control, or who were even allied to them. This included Norway and France, and in each state the Nazis again rolled out events to highlight the Mason-Jewish conspiracy. In 1943, when Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered the German army to the Soviets at Stalingrad, Hitler denounced him as a Freemason. It is estimated that between 80,000 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered by the Nazis. A very similar story can be found in Mussolini's fascist Italy, where in 1924 members of the Fascist Party, were told they could not be members of the Freemasons. In 1925, he dissolved the Freemasons, using the claim that it was a political party and hence outlawed. One military general actually gave up his membership of the Fascist Party rather than leave his post as Deputy Grand Master. He was arrested and sentenced to 30 years in jail. In Hungary, where a dictatorship was declared in 1919, a brutal campaign was undertaken against Freemasons. Libraries, lodges, works of art were all stolen or destroyed. It was outlawed completely in 1920. It was, they claimed, a meeting place of the enemies of the People's Democratic Republic, of capitalist elements, and of the adherents of Western imperialism. In Spain, the story was not so immediate, but still went against the Freemasons. In 1928, 200 Masons, including the Grand Master, were arrested and jailed for plotting against the government. By 1936, things had turned worse, and any Freemason found in nationalist-controlled areas were arrested, tortured, and killed by death squads. The witch-finder general was Father Juan Tusquet Terrats. He gathered together a list of over 80,000 Freemasons, and yet the official Freemasonry records have only 5,000. Nevertheless, they were rounded up and murdered. By 1940, and under the new leadership of Franco, Freemasonry was officially outlawed in all Spain and was punishable by a minimum of 12 years, and anybody above 18 degrees would face the death penalty. So were the Spanish right to fear the Freemasons? Well, the truth is that they did hold a high office in all elements of government and military. Indeed, they were proud of the fact. The bond between brothers was so strong that many actually preferred to go into exile than leave their lodge. From the outside looking in, such fraternity among people who hold very powerful positions could be said to be dangerous. A kind of power behind the power. But could we as easily say the same thing about people who are Catholics? They too have strong bonds and belief systems. They too often hold positions of authority. The question is, where does the suspicion end? The problem is, it ends with brutality and murder of innocent people. The fact is, anti-Freemasonry had been bubbling in Europe for many years. It was seen as a threat to many people in power. Ever since the 18th century and its official origins, the society had come up against opposition, and yet it grew. Wherever men meet, then some kind of conspiracy will always happen, whether at the lodge or church. Children in the playground conspire. It's a natural thing. The problem comes when those conspiring hold great power and conflicts of interest occur. Freemasonry is not innocent of causing the downfall of governments or regimes. It has appeared to have its hand in many pies. But there is insufficient evidence to pin upon them all the claims made against them by the fascists and Nazis. It is not a basis for mass abuse and murder, and our history reveals that things can rapidly get out of control and innocent people suffer. If the Freemasons had really been so powerful and in control, it is doubtful they would have allowed such abuse to continue, and they certainly would have tried to get the Americans involved in the war sooner. In Japan, there was a secretive right-wing organisation known as the Black Dragon Society. Taking its name from the Black Dragon River, its official origin was in 1901 and was intended to support the Russian Empire. Members included cabinet ministers, very high-ranking military officers, and Secret Service agents. Gradually, the society resorted to criminal activities to ensure its efforts were effective. They created a spy school and sent agents out across Russia, China and Korea. Using pressure tactics, they started to control Japanese foreign policy at a high level and helped to fund revolutionaries in various nations. In the Russo-Japanese War over Korea and Siberia, the Japanese Imperial Army even used the Society's spies for espionage and assassination. They employed warlords and psychological warfare with propaganda. Eventually, the Society became incredibly useful during the Second World War, as their agents were spread across East and Central Asia. They had thousands of contacts within the Islamic and Buddhist nations. They had very quickly become one of the most powerful Asian secret societies the world has ever witnessed. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, they became a more mainstream political organisation on the right wing. We are led to believe that they only had a dozen or so members at this time, but those members had links with and control over government officials, business leaders, military commanders, and various nationalist organisations. Although their origin was to aid the Russian Empire, they eventually reached out across the world. In the USA, they were implicated in the black nationalist groups which were tried and convicted of sedition in 1942. Members of the Black Dragon Society were arrested by the FBI in California on March 27, 1942. After the war, the US occupiers of Japan outlawed the group, and it was disbanded in 1946. However, in 1961, the group came back together and formed the Black Dragon Club, which claimed to have 150 members with the same aims as the original Black Dragon Society. We turn now to political intrigue within the British Secret Service and their links to secret societies. Although it may seem fanciful to us today that the occult world could have any influence upon those in power, the fact is that it did, and in many ways still does. Many of the rituals within Freemasonry are based upon the occult, and a great many men in power around the world are practicing Freemasons. It was no different in the Second World War. The British Secret Service, in fact, were very bold in their approach to the occult and asked many of them to aid the cause. One of those who understood the occult and was in fact deeply involved in it himself was the creator of the James Bond novels, Ian Fleming. During the war, he was in fact the Assistant Director of Naval Intelligence and was known as Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming. In my book, The Bond Code, I make the case that Ian Fleming not only understood the occult, but actually included dozens of clever codes and ciphers within his novels, revealing the secrets of the occult. This was something only those with the eyes to see would understand, only those who already had the code. Ian Fleming was a dualistic individual who spent time in his early life at the hands of a special school in Switzerland in order to overcome his issues created because of a domineering mother, a dead father, and a successful elder brother.
From time immemorial, artistic insights have been revealed to artists in their sleep and dreams, so that at all times they ardently desired them. Then their imagination could work wonders upon wonders and invoke the shades of the philosophies who would instruct them in their art. Translated by Arthur Edward Waite.
It was here that he learned the sacred ways of the early Gnostics and occultists from people such as the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And this is the root of the secrets of James Bond. The occult secret is in fact a work upon the self and the methods employed to create the perfect person. Fleming needed this because he was a troubled youth. Fleming eventually became immersed in the world of secret agencies and secret societies at the very highest level, and he loved it. But how do we know this? Ian Fleming explicitly said that Bond was Manichaean, a distinct Gnostic concept, and one revealing the psychological duality within the man, who created Bond as an alter ego in order to overcome his own emotional turmoil, as well as make distinct Gnostic statements. Relatively unknown to the wider world, Ian Fleming actually translated a lecture given by Carl Jung himself on the mystic Paracelsus. During this and later periods, Ian Fleming became greatly influenced by the world of the esoteric, and James Bond became for him a Calvinist dragon slayer. Gnostic thought states that we must unite opposites in order to be whole, and discover our true self. This was imaged in alchemy as the union of the male and female. Only by uniting these two could the great work be completed.
He thought of the girl, and the thought gave him strength. He wasn't dead yet. Damn it, he wouldn't die, not until the heart was torn from his body. Dr. No, Ian Fleming.
James Bond only ever saves the world when in union with his female counterpart. The Bond books, and indeed therefore films, are scattered with alchemical and Gnostic references for those with the eyes to see. They are also full of etymological clues to the real meaning hidden within these modern mythical plays. Ian Fleming associated with or was influenced by mystics and spiritually inclined individuals, which reveal his inner and hidden thoughts. People such as Rosamond Lehman, Dame Edith Sitwell, with whom Fleming was going to write a book on the mystic Paracelsus, Aleister Crowley, Sybil Leek, Sefton Delmer, Dennis Wheatley, Sax Rohmer, Dr. John Dee, Carl Jung. In fact, it is well known that Fleming kept his groups quite separate from each other for secrecy. The Code 007 was an esoteric device of Gnostics and mystics, and was also that of Dr. John Dee from the 16th century. The infamous mystic and spy of the realm to Queen Elizabeth I. The Queen herself signed her letters to Dee as M. Dee was thrown out of university for creating a flying machine, and Fleming wrote the very alchemical Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. We do know that he was reading a biography of Dee at the time of writing Casino Royale, the first Bond novel. Fleming's own retreat, Goldeneye, was named after certain alchemical and mystical terms. The location was known as Arakabessa, the Golden Head, and is a symbol well known in alchemical and mystical circles to be the perfected man. Naming the site Goldeneye was also symbolic of the all-seeing eye. In alchemy, the serpent is a symbol of regeneration and wisdom, but also of negative energy. It is the symbol of dualism, which so confronted Fleming throughout his life. Fleming used the serpent often in his novels. The Ouroboros Fish and Bait Company, where an Ouroboros is a serpent eating its own tail. Hugo Drax, where Drax is dragon, the winged serpent, and Hugo is mind, spirit, or heart, and therefore we have the mind of the serpent. Auric Goldfinger is an alchemical term. Auric is alchemy talk for gold, and the golden finger indicates the alchemist himself, whose finger turns gold through the great work. Mr. Big was known as Gallia, which is an alchemical metallic substance. He was also known as Kananga, a Voodoo and Angolan term for water used to purify. Blofeld has a network of spies in Tartar, the Greek reference to hell. Scaramanga is a caricature of what is within. In Casino Royale, we have the rival Le Chiffre, who in fact claimed that he was once a Jewish prisoner of Dachau who suffered amnesia and so could only remember the number on his passport. Fleming is telling us quite blatantly that there is a code in the book. In fact, there are depths in the very name he chose, for in Hindi and Sanskrit, the languages of the Eastern philosophers, and which Fleming had read about extensively, Shifra is shunya. This word shunya or sunya is a Sanskrit term for the void or nothingness. This is not the same as that perceived by Western eyes. Instead, it is a distinct metaphysical reality, and from where everything comes. In fact, it is a source of the true self, and here Fleming is pointing out that the code within Bond is the source of everything. In fact, if one looks deeper into the word, one finds that it means the absolute, attainment, realization, and of course, enlightenment, and is often imaged with the third eye. Now take a look at how this nemesis of Fleming dies in the actual book. And suddenly there Schiff had grown another eye, a third eye on a level with the other two, right where the thick nose started to jut out below the forehead. It was a small black eye with eyelashes or eyebrows. Casino Royale, Ian Fleming. Bond himself is related to the serpent. His wife, Tracy, was known as Draco, the dragon or winged serpent. In short, Fleming lived in a fantasy world in order to escape his own inner turmoil, something which led him into his own death through smoking 70 cigarettes a day and drinking copious amounts of alcohol. This fantasy world led him into the land of the occult and Gnostic thought. He created his fantasy alter ego as a great alchemical work to fulfill his own tumultuous and chaotic mind, just as many before have done. But he left behind a set of clues and codes for us to decipher, just as our medieval friends did hundreds of years ago. Fleming left the keys to the great secret of modern and Western secret societies. During the war, Fleming was a friend of the infamous astrologer and mystic Aleister Crowley, who he invited to help when the Nazi Rudolf Hess crash-landed in Scotland. Hess himself was deeply interested in the occult. What actually happened was that Fleming created a plan to lure Hess to the UK. The idea originated with Fleming's brother, Peter, who worked with MI5 and the Special Operations Executive. Using wealthy Nazi British sympathisers, Fleming managed to actually get Hess to believe he would be welcomed in the UK with open arms. But more than that, a very real idea that Britain would unite with the Nazis to fight the Russians was used. Using this and bogus astrological charts, Hess was sucked in and actually flew to Scotland, where he crashed and was arrested. A plot worthy of a James Bond novel worked perfectly, and Hitler was fuming. However, although the plot was perfect and it did actually work, the British government made a mess of the following events. It appears that Churchill believed the claims that high-ranking British officials were in reality pro-Nazi. On top of this, the Nazis countered and said that Hess was in fact insane. The propaganda capital was undermined, and the whole thing subsequently hushed up. However, the Gestapo now became fearful that the occult was being used against them, and began rounding up psychics, astrologers, and basically anybody involved in the occult. Public performances of fortune-telling, psychics and astrology were outlawed, and occult-based secret societies closed down and banned. All those associated with Rudolf Hess and the occult were thrown into concentration camps. However, some of the psychics were in fact taken away and used by naval intelligence to track down British submarines by map dowsing with pendulums. The British were just as gullible, and they too were fearful of the occult. In fact, they were scared that mediums would reveal the plans for the D-Day landings through seances. It was in fact no surprise that the occult should play a big role on both sides. It's something that has always been the case. In Germany, the origin of the occult found a home in the Thule Society, sponsored by a party that later became known as the Nazi Party. Many of the members and guests of the Thule Society were in fact the highest ranking members of the Nazi Party. It all began when the World War I veteran Walter Neuhaus became the keeper of pedigree for another secret society known as the Order of Teutons. In 1918 he came into contact with an occultist called Sebottendorf, and the Thule Society then became a cover name for a secret society engulfed in the tales of the Holy Grail. Primarily, this society was involved with the idea of an Aryan race, and anybody who joined had to declare a blood oath regarding their true lineage. The idea was simple. Thule, or Thule, was supposed to have been a land far to the north, mentioned by writers such as Virgil. In all likelihood, it was a general term for Scandinavia, what was then the edge of the known world. The mystics of the Nazi Party said Thule was a lost ancient land, a concept popular worldwide and fostered by science fiction writers. It was the land of the fabled Aryan race, and backed up by the fact Scandinavia actually had ancient swastika symbols carved into rocks. It was Atlantis, and the chosen people, the Aryans, were more special than everybody else. To be an Aryan was simply to be superior. It was no secret that the Thule Society were out to combat Judaism and communism, but Sebottendorf was plotting. In 1918 he planned to kidnap the Bavarian Prime Minister, but failed. The following year the Thule Society were accused of infiltrating the government, and several of them were arrested. The response from the Thule Society was to organise a popular uprising. They brought a newspaper and began the propaganda machine. Members of the society then set up a workers' political party. A man named Adolf Hitler joined in 1919, and by 1920 it became known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, otherwise known as the Nazi Party. Members of the Thule Society would go on to teach Hitler and become prominent members of the Nazi Party. Its job was done, and so it was dissolved before Hitler came to power, but the seeds were sown. And what of Sebottendorf? He would later say, early in 1920, Karl Heuer was forced out of the DAP as Hitler moved to sever the party's links with the Thule Society, which subsequently fell into decline, and was dissolved about 5 years later, well before Hitler came to power. Thulers were the ones to whom Hitler first came, and Thulers were the first to unite themselves with Hitler. Because the Nazi Party had tried to suppress all esoteric thought that did not run with the party line, they were unhappy with the comment, and he found himself under arrest before fleeing in exile. The legacy of the Thule Society is clearly seen within the Nazi Party, its beliefs regarding the Aryan race, and in organisations such as the Ann Arbor section of the SS, whose job it was to track down the occult relics of the world, such as the Holy Grail. All of this occult secret society intrigue was watched from afar by the Church. According to the official statements, the Catholic Church simply kept quiet during the Hitler reforms. They eventually claimed that many Catholic priests were victimised by the Nazis for their part in freeing Jews and other non-desirables. This is indeed true. The Catholic Church did remain quiet, and there were individuals within the Church that stood up for the rights of man. However, there is a darker side to the Catholic role in the running of the Nazi war and Holocaust machines. As a child, Adolf Hitler attended classes at a Benedictine monastery, which is where he first saw the now infamous swastika. Here he sang in the choir and claimed that he dreamt of one day taking holy orders. "I am now, as before, a Catholic, and will always remain so," he is reported to have said to one of his generals. The Catholic Church in fact never excommunicated him, and when we consider that a person could be excommunicated for just misdemeanours as giving water to an infidel, then this is quite a turn-up. The stark fact remains that the Catholic Church turned a blind eye to the Nazi oppression, especially as it had just spent the last few centuries trying to rid the world of Jewry itself. In fact, taken to this end, and the hidden links between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church, we can start to see a picture of a Christian purging of the Jews in process. A process that appears to have been going on for an awful long time. Some have claimed, however, that this was a balancing act, in that the Jews were getting too powerful in Europe at the time and needed trimming. The Catholic deal with the Nazis involved having further privileges for its priests and even permission to get involved in the public school system with a massive $400 million in state aid. It also led to a clearing of anti-Catholic lawsuits, as by 1940 Hitler had erased or quashed over 7,000 legal cases against Catholic priests. All in all, the Catholic Church was doing quite well out of the process. A concordat with the Catholic Church in 1933 stated the following: "The German Reich guarantees the freedom of the profession and public exercise of the Catholic religion. Catholics shall enjoy the protection of the state in the same manner as the employees of the state." To the Catholics, this was all perfect, and so why should they make life hard for the Nazis? To the Nazis, they gained prestige and seemingly backing from the Roman Catholics. They also needed to ensure that their allies of the future, Italy, would not be upset. Many authors have in fact shown that even following the end of the war, the Nazis were aided in their escapes by the brothers in the Catholic Church, escaping via monasteries and nunneries and into deeply Catholic countries in South America, especially with the aid of certain Jesuits. It would not do to call people into a secret society and then for them to be left high and dry when the whole thing collapses. Franz von Papen was the Chancellor of Germany between June 1932 and 1933, and first Vice-Chancellor of the Third Reich under Adolf Hitler. Papen has been called Hitler's mentor, and to this end he should have theoretically known what Hitler himself was thinking. Papen gives us an insight into those thoughts in his book My Conversations with Hitler. Hitler has put into practice the high ideals of the papacy. What exactly Papen means by this we really cannot say, but it implies the obvious, that Adolf Hitler was working directly for the Pope. It turns out that without Papen, Hitler would have struggled to gain power. Papen was born to a very wealthy Catholic family in Westphalia and served in the First World War in Turkey. On his return from the First World War, he joined politics on the far right, and in 1932 was plucked from supposed obscurity by President Hindenburg to be Chancellor. It was this friendship that allowed Hitler's rise to power, as previously Hindenburg had said he would never allow Hitler to become Chancellor. Franz von Papen, it seems, was a highly influential individual in the politics of Nazi Germany, and he was also a Jesuit. Papen saw through several elements which helped the integration of the Catholic ideals, including the mixing of the Catholic youth and the Hitler youth, and signing the Concordat between the Vatican and Munich. Pope Pius wrote to Hitler, "To the illustrious Herr Adolf Hitler, Führer and Chancellor of the German Reich, here at the beginning of our pontificate, we wish to assure you that we remain devoted to the spiritual welfare of the German people entrusted to your leadership. During the many years we spent in Germany, we did all in our power to establish harmonious relations between church and state. Now that the responsibilities of our pastoral function have increased our opportunities, how much more ardently do we pray to reach that goal? May the prosperity of the German people and their progress in every domain, with God's help, to fruition." In fact, Pope Pius began a tradition of holding a birthday party for Hitler, sending warmest congratulations to the Führer in the name of the bishops and diocese of Germany. Here is what Hitler himself thought of the secretive Catholic Jesuit order. "I learned much from the order of Jesuits. Until now there has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchical organisation of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organisation into my own party." A former chief of Nazi counter-espionage said, "The SS organisation had been constituted by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuit order. Their regulations and the spiritual exercise prescribed by Ignatius of Loyola were the model Himmler tried to copy exactly. Himmler's title as Supreme Chief of the SS was to be the equivalent of the Jesuits' general, and the whole structure was a close imitation of the Catholic Church's hierarchical order." Indeed, we even find that a lot, if not all, of Mein Kampf was believed by some to have been written by Bernard Stempfel, a Jesuit priest. It would not be the first time that the Catholic Church has been implicated in the running of a state, and it would not be the last. Across time, there has always been a secret society somewhere working on something. What, who, and why are always the question. During, before, and following the Second World War, a great many secretive organisations were at work, and they weren't always the secret services of a particular country. Often these secret societies crossed boundaries and borders. They passed by religion and royalty. They met in secret, decided upon ultimate outcome, and set in motion a series of events. Sometimes the plans worked, sometimes they did not, but they always watched and waited, adjusting and meddling. They may change their names, appear to disband or walk off into exile, but the spirit of change fostered by these secretive men remains. And what of today? What will historians discover in the future about our times? Who is truly in charge?